G'day, I'm Andrew, I'm 25 and this is my 2006 Daihatsu Mira. Alright, so my first car I actually got probably a year before I could even drive legally. It was a 1974 Austin 1300. I saw it on Facebook Marketplace just as that was brand new. And it just looked really cool because the suspension was down really low, and I was yarning to my dad about it, and he told me that the suspension was actually broken and that's not how it should be, and he lent me some money. It was $500 and we went and picked it up, and it didn't run. The cylinder head was off the car, and that afternoon we'd got it running. Dad had grown up with those vehicles himself, knew all about it, so we were able to fix that up pretty quickly, and then just did a little bit of work here and there before I could even get my license to that car. Got my license, learnt to drive in that car, then it broke, because of course it did, it's in Austin. So during that time was also learning to drive in my dad's 99 Corolla. So those sort of two cars have influenced where I've been from then. Older cars, old Japanese cars, simple, basic, reliable 90s cars. Yep. So I had that car for a few years, still got it actually, but I don't use it much anymore because it's always needing a new thing fixed or some kind of state of repair it needs. I've had lots of parts cars in the past, Wolseley's or Morris, they're all the same car, all rubbish, don't know why I bother, but there's something about it that I really enjoy. Moved to Auckland in 2015, tried to drive that car there, the Austin, but it broke down in Picton. So yeah, New Zealand is quite long and skinny, and it's two main islands. I lived in Christchurch, which is sort of the largest city in the South Island, and I was moving to Auckland, which is the largest city in New Zealand. It's a solid day's drive, like 24-hour drive with a 4-hour ferry in the middle, about that. And it's pretty boring straight road if you're going on the main state highway. And my car didn't make it, so yeah, got a tow truck. I think I saw the bill, which was covered by my roadside assistance, but the bill was like $700. They put me up in a taxi, a motel, and a flight, and then towed my car there in like 4 days. Moved to Auckland, was going to study photography actually. Didn't have a car, the car was broken, it was sitting on the lawn of my ex-girlfriend's mum's house for like a year before I finally fixed it. In that time I was just catching the bus everywhere, or riding my Yamaha V50, which I also got shipped up from Christchurch. Eventually got the Austin fixed, but it was always having troubles because I didn't have a proper garage to work on it. I didn't have the tools, or there was always something that just wasn't right. So shortly after that, I found at a wrecking yard a Nissan Sentra, 1990 Nissan Sentra Sport Wagon. It was sitting at the wrecking yard. It was in too good of a condition to break up for parts because it had a dodgy gearbox, but it was cheap. It was like $800 WOF and reg, means it's legal to go. So I drove it around for a while to get me to uni, drive around the North Island, took it away up north for New Year's. Gearbox blew up, went back to the same wrecking yard, found another gearbox for $50, put it on the driveway of my flat. And then yeah, it got a bit rusty, so I did end up selling that car, as most of my cars are rusty. Got rid of that and used the money to put towards a 1985 Toyota Land Cruiser 60 series. Really enjoyed that big wagon, red Toyota, red Japanese car life. Diesel, very slow, very large, completely impractical for Auckland City.
Can I just say,
yeah,
I've never ever come into these, it'll hear me fine, you can sit there.
Yeah.
The first time I ever heard Andrew's Land Cruiser, we went to visit him and he was down a really, really long driveway and we were standing on the roadside and I could hear this train coming and I was wondering, why is there a DC locomotive somewhere near us?
Yeah.
And it was just your Land Cruiser. So yeah, they're really loud and slow and cool.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and I had the Land Cruiser for a while, took it all around the South Island, had a bike rack on it, took the motorbike everywhere, keep getting stuck off-road because it was only 2.5 wheel drive. The front drive shaft was broken. I didn't know. And then, usual story, that was really rusty. I was filling up with diesel one day and like poking at the roof line because it was looking a bit flaky. Poked at it with my key and the key went through the roof. And at that point, I knew it was time to get rid of that one. It was beyond my repair ability. Sold the Land Cruiser, kept quite a lot of the money aside for our trip overseas. We went to Malaysia and Thailand, rode some more bikes around. Yeah, funded that by selling the Land Cruiser. But I had about $1,000 spare, so I bought a Daihatsu Paisar, weird kind of minivan thing, 1.6 litre engine, front wheel drive, 5-speed manual. Very fun to drive for what it was. It was just an in-between car, something to get me to work and back. Paisars they're pretty uninspiring really. They just look like a little melted egg. That was fine. Yeah, got it off a friend of mine who was moving overseas himself. Drove it around for a bit. Sold it for the same amount I bought it for. In that time, I also tried to buy another 90s Corolla and like repair it up and flip it for money, but it got broken into the day after I got it and it wasn't insured. And I ended up spending the money I'd put aside for profit on that, fixing the window and fixing the ignition barrel, so it was kind of a pointless exercise, but is what it is. Yeah, sold the Corolla, made a little bit of coin on it, but really not a lot. Did our trip overseas and then came back, and once we were back, I had always been pining for a ute or a pickup truck. After selling the Land Cruiser and not having a way to take around my bikes as easily, I thought a ute would be the correct answer, and it was. So I found a 95 Nissan D21, Nissan Datsun Navara. It was on Trade Me, so I was bidding on it at work one day. I'm just like standing there at the front counter at work on my phone bidding on this ute. Ended up winning it for like $2.5 grand, which nowadays is very cheap. Although again, it's not perfect, it's done a lot of Ks, and it was very slow, diesel, usual story. Since then I've added a turbo to it, put wheels, lowered it, and I still have that car. I use it every other day. It's my daily sort of pick stuff up, need to go somewhere, just everything ute. Ute broke, gearbox blew up. Yeah. So the Navara, the gearbox was making a really bad noise in 5th gear, and I knew that it needed a rebuild. I wasn't gonna let it break down on me somewhere, because I don't have time for that. So I pulled that off the road to repair it, and in the meantime needed a car to get me to work, because it was in the middle of winter. I didn't want to be riding my motorbike in the rain. So I found a Daihatsu Charade 4-door. It was just again on Facebook for less than $2 grand. Messaged the guy and went and picked it up that night. If you want to hear more about that one and how I got to this car, check out the previous video. So anyway, turn of events, that one got crashed. Ended up with this 2-door mirror of the same chassis. It might look pretty normal to you or a bit unusual, but in New Zealand especially, it's actually quite rare. I believe it's the only 2-door Daihatsu mirror of this chassis in New Zealand, according to NZTA, which is our transport agency. The majority of the ones here on the roads are 4-door and a 1-litre engine. This one is a 2-door and a 660cc engine. So it makes it a little bit unique, which is why I wanted this one in particular and paid a little bit more than I should have, but I got it. Actual KEI CAR, not a small hatchback. Actual KEI CAR class. This car is 2006. It's one of the last of this shape. It was sold in Japan. It's full base model. There's no frills on it, no extras. I've added some since then, but when I got it, there was nothing in it, no stereo, just a little speaker on the dash with an AM radio. It was imported to New Zealand in 2012, so it's not been here that long really. In that time, it's only had 2 owners. It was imported by a car yard in Palmerston North, and then quite quickly sold to an old lady who seemed to have not driven it much at all. And then she sold that, she got rid of that probably 6 months ago. And some young fella in Palmy picked it up and was using it to get to work, but then sold it because he didn't need it anymore. And that's where I found it. So as I said, this car is a base model, which means there's no extras. It's only 2-door, it's got 12-inch wheels, which the tyres are about this thick. They're tiny, it's got manual windows, manual locks, manual boot lock, no lining on the interior in the boot. The back seat is pointless, it's so small. Front seats don't really adjust, they just kind of are. There's a single windscreen squirter, whereas most cars have 2. It's got air conditioning, which is unusual, and leveling headlights. Those are the only 2 features. Everything else, no, it doesn't have. I haven't had the car for a long time, maybe 2 or 3 months at this point. In that time, within the first week of me owning it, I put it on the lowered suspension, which I'd kept from the previous car. Yeah, if you want to hear about how I got that stuff, check out the previous video of the first impressions of this car, which was about When did we do that? About a week after I got it. Since then it's changed a little bit. So I put the suspension in, painted the wheels, just took the hubcaps off, made them black, had the guards widened and rolled a little bit to fit the, turning with the suspension. I've just bought some mag wheels for it, haven't got them yet. Added a few extra little bits and pieces from a better model, the mud flaps, the grab handle inside, cup holders. It had none of those, so I've put them on. A little bit of maintenance. I've done an oil change. I replaced the CV boot because it was torn. That's it. Other than that, I just use it to get to work because it's really good on petrol, and petrol's very expensive at the moment. This weekend just been, had it at a friend's wedding. He wanted it as his wedding car because it looks quite cool and it's a bit unusual. So it was parked up there with his really nice Volkswagen Beetle. Had some photos with it. Yep, so that was pretty neat. Had ribbons and everything on it. So those are the 2 vehicles I have. No, I've got 3 vehicles. I've still got my Austin. It's in a good friend's shed on his farm. I haven't seen it for like a year. I hope it's still there. It's broken, it's waiting for some rust repairs, and it needs a distributor cap. And it's me just being slack with nowhere to store it, so I can't have it at home. I just have to live on the driveway. Okay, so future plans for the Daihatsu. It's getting some mag wheels, which are 13-inch and only like 4.5 wide. So still quite small, but should fit quite well on a smaller car. It's automatic and it's 3-cylinder. And it goes fine, but maybe if I ever had the parts, a little turbo would be cool, because this style of engine did come out with a turbo, but it doesn't need it, so not high on the priority list. It could maybe manual swap it as well, but again, it's fine. The suspension can definitely go a little bit lower, but it is already quite low, so. I'm pretty happy with it as is. For work, I am a store manager of a car parts retailer or automotive accessories retailer. I'd say that's influenced my vehicle choices quite heavily, because day to day I am helping people with their cars, and I'm seeing what cars have the most problems or need the most parts or the most expensive parts. And that time I've learned that probably anything that is Audi, BMW, great when they work, have driven a few, drive really nicely, but when it comes to maintain them, especially when they get about 10, 15, 20 years old, you're looking at thousands of dollars for a basic service or just a basic part. Anything that is like Holden Cruise, Holden Captiva, those sort of, I don't know where they were made. The Holdens that aren't Holdens, some of them are Chevys, GM stuff, same thing, they're just really poor quality. And then I also wouldn't buy like a 2010 onwards Nissan, like a Nissan Qashqai or Bluebird Selfie. They're just really poor quality inside. All the plastic is going sticky and yuck, and the spark plugs cost about $50 each. The reason I chose the Nissan, or the Nissan Datsun, Nissan Navara, is because there's so many of them already here in New Zealand, either sold new here or imported. Have a lot of Japanese import cars, which means that parts are very cheap and plentiful already in the country. Whereas if you're owning something European especially, the parts have to come a long way from Europe to here because we're really far away. So they cost a lot in travel and logistics and time as well. So the style of mechanic in New Zealand is always geared towards something reliable or easy to fix. If it gets to like a Mercedes where there's computers controlling every single component, that's a bit scary for just the average mechanic, so it gets expensive. So this car is, he's chasing the bird. So this car, as I said, is based on, or is the same chassis as the 4-door version we got here in New Zealand. But I've already discovered, even just changing like the CV boot a couple of days ago, parts aren't quite the same as the 4-door 1-litre version, which is fine. Parts out of Japan are fairly easy to get. There's quite a few importers in New Zealand, so I'm not too worried about it. If I needed something, it won't be impossible to get something. You wouldn't want to own this if you didn't know how to use the internet, for sure. You can't just walk down to your local parts shop and buy something as easily as you could your Corolla. So first sort of exposure to this type of small nugget car was probably Mighty Car Mods back in the day with their Daihatsus. But I guess when we went to Malaysia, we saw a lot of this style of car. They were Perodjuas or Protons, and I would say 80% of them were modified in some way, whether it be nice wheels or a body kit or a spoiler, suspension, exhausts. I guess it's because they're cheap and accessible to everybody over there. They just make do with what they have. Whereas here in New Zealand, we have already got quite an interesting sort of car park of cars in the country. We've got your Skylines, your performance Japanese cars, everything like that's already here. So if you've got money or interested in cars, you're going to go straight to that kind of stuff. People will skip over this. I would kind of steer away from mainstream stuff. Like, there's definitely enthusiasts for this sort of car out here in New Zealand, but when you're driving around, people are like, what is that? Why is it so small? And what's the point? And that's what I enjoy. Yeah. I have an appreciation for all vehicles really, but owning something fast or cool has never been a goal of mine. I like what I like, be it a weird old unreliable British car or a diesel Land Cruiser that's slow. Those are what interest me. I won't often pick something or be drawn to something because other people like it. It'll be because I like it or have an interest in it. And it doesn't matter too much to me if it's unreliable or hard to get parts for, because like it's a hobby of mine, or I find enjoyment in tinkering and fixing cars. Just been, the CV boot was gone and like the grease was all exploding, and every couple of hours of this drive I was doing, I had to put more grease in it and then like figure out how to get the boot off and like do all this. And I don't care, like it's just part of it. I enjoy it. It wasn't a hassle. I guess I'm kind of lucky because I always have other options of how to get to work or how to do whatever. It's not often been a need to fix the problem immediately. I would just like to improve what I have or find other niche weird vehicles. Yeah, like for example, my Ute goes fine, but it could definitely do with an intercooler, and it could always have something else changed or upgraded. I'd like to lower it some more, put better wheels on it, paint that. This one, as I said, could do with a turbo and a manual. Yeah, I don't think I need to chase a dream car. I just want to make what I have the best it can be. Yeah, New Zealand is a small country, small compared to everywhere else in the world almost. There's only 5 million people here, and in this town alone, how many is that? Like,
I think we've got a couple 100,000 there.
Yeah, it's still not heaps, really. And there's only like 1,000 of this car, and most of them are crashed or driven by like grandma. So, yeah, I don't know. It would be cool if there was clubs for, or groups, and there is, but they're very spread out. There's maybe only like 20 people that like the same thing. I mean, I'm sure people appreciate this or like think it looks cool, but they don't nerd out on it the same. I don't know if it needs that. It would be cool, but I don't know. That's not really an answer. If anyone knows where to get Big M badges, as in Big M Thailand, please let me know on Instagram. It's @_Andrew_Wilson. Thanks. My name's Andrew, and this is my Daihatsu Mira.